Welcome back to the holy shit! I don't even remember what we're called. Sweatin Bullets.
Started at 30.
Podcast.
Started at 30.
Okay. Welcome back to Sweatin Bullets, a Bulletproof fantasy football podcast. I'm your host, the FB Encounter. With me, as always, is Jacob Satterson at Jacob Satterson on X. How's it going, Jacob?
It's going good. First off, I think we should address the elephant in the room, which is like, is this still a podcast? My answer to that is kind of, we're currently podcasting, so you're listening to it, which means that it's a podcast. Believe it or not, keeping up a weekly podcast between what is now a full-time accountant and full-time lawyer is a struggle. So I would say you'll sometimes get episodes, and to consider it a nice surprise. We'll see, maybe by in season, but we wanted to get together and talk about the draft class. Part of the fun of this episode, though, for me, is that because we've been kind of in our own silos more this offseason, we've barely talked about this draft class together. So I don't know that we necessarily know how each other feels about this draft class, which is good. This will be kind of an organic vibe as we work our way through. We're going to talk today about, I think, at length about the top 8 of this class. And then we're going to go deeper into the receivers and maybe into some of the extra quarterbacks. We're not going to talk much at all about the running backs today. You might get a running back episode from us sometime in the future. But are you excited? Excited about the 2024 rookie class? I guess first question. Good class, bad class?
I think it's one of the more unique classes we've seen in like literally the past 20 years. I can't think of any class that jumps out at me as this type of class. It's super deep at the top. Like the high-end players, I feel like, are as strong as any group of high-end players we've ever seen in a draft class. And then the weird thing, though, is that for me, I don't really like the rest of the class, but the NFL loves them. And that's really weird to me. So I'm excited for the class because I feel like there's a lot of potential for manipulating draft boards to have some nice profits on draft day.
I agree. I don't know if this is the most excited I've ever been for a rookie class, but this is the most excited I've ever been for rookie drafts, because I think that it's like really, really a blank canvas this year. To give people an idea, I have 6 players in this class ranked in my top 36 overall, which is pretty crazy, considering that's, the first 3 rounds of startups and none of them have played a game. And then I have 2 other players that I have ranked base first tier or higher. And I have re-updated my rankings today, and I've come down on a couple players, and I've come up on a couple other players. And the result of that is that I don't have a single player ranked actually as a late first value. So I have 8 players that I have ranked effectively as mid first or better. And then I have I think it was like 7 players ranked as an early second value, and 8 or 9 more players ranked as a base second value. And so it's going to be really fun to navigate this draft board. Some of that is going to change when we get in landing spots. I'm really hoping for some really sexy landing spots for some of those players just outside the top 8, because for me, this draft class is all about how do I trade into the top 8 to select, really specifically the guys that I'm really, really excited about and want to have tons and tons of exposure to. And from there, I don't really care where my picks are or who I'm taking. I just kind of want as many as possible because, like we're going to talk about, there is just a horde of wide receivers who the NFL is telling us are very, very good and are going to go on day 1 or early on day 2. Traditionally, their analytical profile does not suggest that a lot of these guys are very good, with a couple of exceptions. But we can debate and discuss sort of how much COVID or modern scouting or anything else has changed the signal of the analytical process we use.
Or nil, or what is it? Not
even
nil.
NIL, yeah. I mean,
NIL.
But even beyond any of that, you give us 8 long shot or coin flip round 2 wide receivers, like probably 3 are hitting. So it's just a matter of like, which ones are going to be the ones that hit. I don't really know. I'll ask you a question first. This has been something I talked about a lot on it used to be the Full Tilt podcast. It's now Dynasty Points. How do you feel about the idea that the Dynasty market has really become more and more shaped by these like age-adjusted production profiles, to the extent where like there's really not as much of an edge coming from it. Like I think it used to be that ADP was more or less a composite of landing spot and draft capital. And so it's very easy to separate from that by saying, well, look at the production profiles, like the age-adjusted production profiles of these guys. I mean, I think the starkest picture of this to me is near the top of the draft class, where big NFL media take is Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze are basically the same. They're basically equivalent. And so my natural reaction to that is to look into the profile and say, no, they're not equivalent. Malik Neighbors is substantially better. He was substantially more productive. He's younger. He's declared earlier. He was more efficient, better statistically in every possible way. The issue with that, of course, is that, Malik Neighbors is going like 2 rounds ahead of Rome Odunze in startups. So the dynasty market is already on the side of the nerds. They're not on the side of the NFL. So how do you change your approach when you go into a rookie draft with that in mind?
I don't know that you really change your approach at all. Like the way that I do rookie drafts or startup drafts or just dynasty in general is I just tend to like almost like define the player that I'm looking at independent of anything else. And then I go to the market to see where everyone else likes that player. And then that player either becomes a buy or a sell at that point. So the fact that everyone likes Malik Neighbors more than Rome Odunze doesn't really matter to me necessarily. It's, are they liking Malik Neighbors as much as they should, or are they liking him too much? Not like independent of how much they like or dislike Rome Odunze. And I think that's still somewhat relevant. I think it's lost its relevance. Like when I first started talking about like prospecting through numbers, like 4 or 5 or 6 or however many years ago that was, like 2017. What year was that? How many years ago was that? That's like a lot of classes ago, 7 classes ago. I would like go to Twitter and say things, and like there would be so much pushback on virtually everything that I was talking about. And now I go to Twitter and say things, and everyone's like, doesn't care. Like, yeah, we already know this. Like we've been doing this for 5 years now. Like we already know that this is how it should be. And I think that is really, like, you even see a lot of the film grinders, like the traditional film grinders that have been grinding the film for many years in the fantasy football community, are incorporating some degree of analytics now. Not necessarily that they're doing it as well as I would like, but they're doing it. Like those things are an input, like maybe not a huge input, but they're a factor for sure for almost everyone that I look at now.
Oh yeah, we had Danny Kelly on the show just last night on Dynasty Points, and he's primarily grinding the film. And we were talking about Adonai Mitchell, and the first thing he brings up is like, I really liked this guy when I was watching him, and then I went and looked at some of his production metrics, and I was like, oh, like it's really bad, and I have to try and find a way to bring those two things together. And so it's and there are people that don't, but most people that are worth their salt, even if that's not at the forefront of what they're doing, they're building in some way like, oh, this guy's production profile actually stinks. So like I should be careful a little bit, right? And then that and that changes how things go. And I would wager that the NFL is even doing that a little bit more, which is a little bit interesting, because our whole game, right, is it's two things. It's we're trying to find a way to beat ADP, and then we're trying to figure out what the right ingredients are to add to draft capital and stir. And so like for our purposes, it would be ideal if the NFL was not factoring in these things at all. Right? Like it would be like, it's bad when we have GMs like Andrew Barry who are just never taking old players. They're just writing off old players, and they're rarely taking on productive players. And it's like, okay, like that's, and then you see David Bell go in the 3rd round to Andrew Barry, and it's like, well, like this whole thing only works if we're getting some sort of like John Rawls veil of ignorance, where the NFL is like drafting based on one thing, and then we get to sort the good ones from the bad ones. But like once the variable becomes confounding, then it starts getting scary. So I do think there's some element to that. The nice thing is that I don't know, like, I don't know that the market is necessarily still doing things in like a particularly systematic way. And I think there are, we're still doing a lot of learning last year's lessons and vibesing, and that can result in like some uninspiring analytical profiles being the ones that we, wish cast away and either red flags, and other analytical profiles being the ones that have no chance of hitting because they most resemble the most recent bust. And so, hopefully we get to be a little bit more discerning within that.
Well, and if you've been doing this for a while, like you see it happen year over year, right? Like I remember in 2019 when we had Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin and Deontay Johnson, and I feel like there's another one in that class, and DK Metcalf, who all really didn't do much in college at all. And then they all were awesome as rookies, 4 rookies. And then they all kind of went on to varying degrees of success as NFL wide receivers. And I remember immediately in 2020, people being like, oh, like production metrics are dead. This doesn't matter anymore. The NFL's figured out how to scout. And it was all this stuff. And then in 2020, we immediately had like a bunch of those players get drafted highly and bust. And it was like, oh, maybe they didn't have it figured out. And then, we have the next player that does something unexpected. And then it's, oh, that doesn't matter anymore. Or, oh, this has changed. And we can come up with, like, I always kind of laugh at this when people like write these narratives. I'm like, I can write narratives really, really well. That's like one of my skills, I would say, is I'm a great narrative writer. I typically try not to, but like if I wanted to, I could really sell a player based on some thing that doesn't matter. I feel like that's something I could really do. And it's like, you can do that for anyone. Like I remember this one guy, I used to be on, what is it called? Dynasty FF Reddit or something like that. And this guy had posted these 2 independent narrative-driven posts about the same player in the opposite direction. And it was the same narrative. They just interpreted it a different way. It was like, this is exactly how narratives work, and why we don't generally use them is because they're up to manipulation. Like they can tell a story. They can tell whatever story you want them to. That's why I don't like narratives. That's why we generally just say, this is the data, and we're going to use the data. And then, we'll adjust for things that, maybe don't exactly fit the, or maybe not exactly fit isn't the right word, but like, or we just don't feel overly comfortable about it in the grand scheme of whatever we're looking at. Like we were just talking before the show about like these bulletproof wide receivers that show up that I'm like, I don't really like those guys. Like the KJ Hamlers and like the small field stretchers. Like they're just not my type. I never ranked them that high. I rank them usually higher than everyone else because everyone else really doesn't like them. But I'm never like, hey, don't leave your draft without KJ Hamler. Like that's just not a profile that I chase, even though it should be a profile that I chase. And then, whatever. KJ Hamler didn't work out, but
no. And we'll talk soon about this year's KJ Hamler Memorial Award.
Or like, it's funny. One other guy I'll mention in the same vein was Diami Brown, and I remember in his draft year, pre-draft, we were in the Discord. I don't know if you were in there yet. I can't remember which year Diami Brown was in now.
I don't think that I was yet, but I do remember liking Diami Brown and being disappointed.
But we were talking about him before the draft, and people were like, oh, but like if he gets drafted early enough, he'd be bulletproof. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't. Like, I kind of hope he gets drafted in round 3, so he isn't. Like, I don't really want him to be bulletproof. I don't think he's that good. He's not my type of receiver. So if he doesn't get drafted early enough, that's okay. We're not going to be too sad about it. We'll probably still draft him in the 3rd round of our rookie draft because why not? But like, we're never going to be like, don't leave your draft without Diami Brown, this field stretcher who didn't really do, like, did a lot in college, but doesn't really like profile as this NFL fantasy producer. And anyways, the moral of the story is it's just fun to like look back at I have this spreadsheet that has all the draft classes by rookie draft picks.
Yeah.
Back to 2007. And I like going through it and just like looking at the profiles again and being like, oh man, like, can you imagine the wars we would have had in the, what was his name? Tavon Austin era? Like the guy went like super high. He was like pretty productive in his final year, but didn't really do a whole lot. I think he was a senior and he was like electric, like on tape. He just popped and like we would have had so many good battles about Tavon Austin. He was small. He was only, what was he, 5'8" or something like that. Like he was a tiny guy.
Barely, if that. Yeah.
And
I maintain that going to Jeff Fisher as his head coach was a tough draw for Tavon Austin.
And here's the funny thing. I don't know if you
were to nominate like coach you least want, revolutionary,
the most creative coach in offensive history,
player that like, right? Like it's like don't you think if Tavon Austin came out in 2024 with Andy Reid, like we might have something. Like maybe he's not an all-pro, but like I trust Andy Reid to figure out some way to use like this. Yeah, I mean, Kadarius Toney seems to have some problems between the ears going on, but yeah, Jeff Fisher was a tough draw for. And didn't they also take Stedman? Didn't they also take Stedman Bailey too? Yeah,
for sure. Do you know what's really funny about that though?
Rams took like all of the players that we couldn't trust them with.
I think it was 2016, and they had Todd Gurley and Tavon Austin. And Todd Gurley and Tavon Austin for like the first 8 games of the season were getting like 60% of all Rams touches. Like everything was going to one of the two of them. And they were doing absolutely nothing. Like Todd Gurley was coming off his rookie season where he was awesome. Now he's getting like all the touches in the backfield and was doing absolutely nothing. Tavon Austin was like, I think that might have been his 3rd year breakout, maybe. I can't remember now which year he was drafted in. Or no, he might have been drafted. I can't remember which year he was drafted in. Anyways.
Great podcasting right now.
Yeah. The moral of the story is they were getting all these touches. And I remember playing fantasy. Like this was before I even played Dynasty. And I was like, oh, I think I'm going to get Tavon Austin in this redraft league because look at all these touches he's getting. And then they just like completely disappeared. It was so funny.
Yeah.
It wasn't funny at the time. I was sad because I just spent a bunch of fab, or maybe I traded for him. I can't remember. But the moral of the story was that Jeff Fisher was force feeding Tavon Austin and Todd Gurley and was getting absolutely no production out of it.
Yeah. He just like wasn't doing it in like a way that made sense. It was just like they just like spamming reverses. Anyway, and bubble screens or whatever. Okay, let's talk about this year's class instead of the 2013 class.
Was that his year, 2013? So 2015 would have been his 3rd year breakout then, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it wasn't that much of a breakout. He had like less than 1,000 total yards. And
it must have been his 2016. It must have been 2016.
No, he never. His career high in receiving yards is 509.
Yeah, so here, okay, listen to his targets, though. This is 2016's game log for Tavon Austin. I'm not making this up. I'm reading this off the screen right now. Game 1, 12 targets. Game 2, 9, 3, 8, 6, 10, 4, 15. And then they all went away. 2, 7, 2, 4.
Oh, wow. Darn.
And he was getting like some yards, like 15, 56, 104, 8, 85, 26, 67, and then all gone.
Huh. Efficiency wins.
It was wild. Yeah. Anyway, that's Jeff Fisher in his creativity doing some magic.
Okay, this year's class. Let's take it from the top. We've teased a couple of the guys, but very first thing that stands out to me. So we look here. It's possible this is slightly out of date because I have this from my post. So this is the ADP as of a week ago. If it's like 1 or 2 spots off, probably doesn't matter that much. But Caleb Williams going 12th overall in Dynasty Superflex startups. Marvin Harrison 14th overall. Malik Neighbors 26th. Jayden Daniels 29th. Drake May 32nd. Brock Bowers 35th. And Rome Odunze 40th. McCarthy's lagging well behind there, but I think that he's probably going to close that gap once he actually gets drafted, where he's going to get drafted. First question, do you we essentially have these 3 receivers and we have these 3 quarterbacks. I mean, technically 4, but I think everybody in the Dynasty community at least sees McCarthy as a step below the rest of the group here. The market is basically saying we have one guy at the top and then we have the next 2 guys. Do you agree, or do you think it is a more expanded tier?
This is for the wide receivers specifically, or for the?
It's both. It's both. We can talk about it. Who do you want to talk about first, the quarterbacks or the receivers? Because I think that there's a lot of similarities between how May and Daniels versus Caleb work, and then Neighbors and Adunze versus Harrison.
Yeah. Let's say the quarterbacks first, because Caleb Williams is number 1.
Sure. Let's talk about the quarterbacks first, and then the receivers. Then maybe we can kind of discuss this group all together in terms of who we're actually targeting. So totally. Quarterbacks first. Is Caleb your QB1? And then I think more importantly, is he your QB1 by as wide of a margin as the rest of the market seems to think?
So I don't think it should be as wide of a margin as the rest of the market seems to think. I think Caleb Williams to me is really good. in a few words, he's very, very good. I don't really have any concerns about Caleb Williams other than how good is he going to be? Is he going to be Patrick Mahomes, or is he just going to be a really, really good quarterback like Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow? And that's, I think, the distinction for me. He could obviously bust as well. Like we've seen excellent quarterbacks not turn into excellent prospects not turn into excellent NFL players. But I just don't know that his ceiling is as high as I would like it to be. But what I will say is that his value ceiling is as high as I would like it to be. And in year 1, I'm not really looking for that production. I'm looking for that big old value gain. And I think Caleb Williams offers a value gain unlike anyone else in this class, especially at the quarterback position. Like Jayden Daniels or Drake May, if they go out and they have really I'm talking within reason.
I mean, I don't think we can put a lid on the value ceiling of any rookie quarterback. I mean, CJ Stroud is currently the 103. So any one of these quarterbacks has a pretty plausible value ceiling of the 103.
Sorry, yes, anyone could be CJ Stroud. I think where I would push back is that is unlikely for everyone else, whereas I feel like that's pretty likely for Caleb Williams. I expect Caleb Williams to be the 103 this time next year, and I definitely don't expect that from anyone else in this class.
Yeah, I kind of agree on both counts. In my overall rankings, it's going to have Caleb in a bit of a separate tier, and part of that's just kind of, I don't know, playing into the market. And in my rookie rankings, it might not actually be that way. I've been a bit torn because I've been kind of advocating, in one sense, to trade down from Caleb, but I also want to make sure that I have some Caleb. So it's a little bit of a tough spot to be in. I think that when I dug into the profile on him, just purely statistically, I came away a little bit underwhelmed compared to how I had always felt about him, just sort of knowing the rough edges of his statistical profile and watching him for several years play. You look at his big time throw rate, for instance, this year. It was, or his break time throw rate versus turnover worthy play ratio this year, 1.72. That ranks behind all of the other top 6 quarterbacks in this class. His big time throw rate overall ranked behind Daniels, ranked behind May, ranked behind Penix. On the bright side, look at his yards per attempt. The only guys that are even close to him are the super senior seasons of Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix are surpassing him. But otherwise, he's come out of the gate. He's ahead of all the rest of these guys. I do have some level of pocket management concerns. One of the things that was notable to me and that I cited in my piece, and I won't go into all the stats for every one of these players, but was the 8th highest pressure to sack ratio among 47 draft eligible quarterbacks at my drop back cutoff in 2023. And the most total pressures allowed, so just total raw pressures allowed, Among those pressures, he had the second highest rate of pressures that PFF college deemed him responsible for, and the fourth lowest rate of pressures that the offensive line was deemed responsible for. So essentially, he was getting pressured constantly. A lot of his pressures were becoming sacks, and the PFF charters were consistently assigning him the blame for the pressures as opposed to the offensive line. So that's a legitimate, like, probably the biggest real life red flag that I have on him. Overall, I'm still not overthinking it. I think he's going to be, awesome. He led a super efficient offense all 3 years immediately. He's young, all that. Probably the one issue is he just doesn't run that much. He has a scramble rate of just 3% from clean pockets. You watch him, he's plenty athletic, but rushing is part athleticism and part tendency, and his tendency, potentially to his credit, even as a real life player, is not to take off and run with the ball. It's to try and throw the ball. And so I think realistically what you're looking at in the NFL, the hope is that he's going to be able to punch in some touchdowns because he is that mobile threat to run, options at the goal line. But I don't think you're looking at a lot of between the 20s rushing volume from him. It wasn't really there in college outside of his first couple starts. So that would be the concern. And in the sense of you're looking at the top 5 guys in this class, and you're asking me, like, who is the safest players in this class? I'd probably say it's Harrison and Neighbors, just because we're tend to be a little bit easier prospecting receivers than quarterbacks are a little bit less environment dependent in that way. And then if you say who has the highest ceiling in this class, I would say, well, it's the 2 quarterbacks who run way more than he does. So we're sort of in this spot where, like, I don't think he has the highest floor of the top 5. I don't think he has the highest ceiling of the top 5. And yet I still think he should go first because I think he has, like, the highest median. And the other big benefit that he has is, of the 3 quarterback landing spots, like, his is just clearly the best. He's going to get Keenan Allen. He's going to get DJ Moore. He's going to get a stable of competent running backs led by DeAndre Swift. And he might even get Rome Odunze too. So it's a pretty great setup for him coming in. And I think all of that makes him pretty safe. And like you mentioned, the value upside from there is absolutely tremendous. So I'm definitely taking him where I have the 101. In terms of what it would cost me to trade down, the way I would look at it is, like, for me, just purely on value, it's probably something like a late 1, early 2 is probably like the equivalent value for me in a vacuum. In reality, I don't want to have 0% of Caleb Williams. So if the market's telling me that he's on this different tier, I want to make sure that I have some of him. And that means I'm only trading out or down of him for the best possible offers. So, ideally that's, one of these other picks plus maybe another top 8 pick or a 2025 first from a team I think really sucks. Or the Caleb Williams trades I have made have been for Josh Allen, for Jamar Chase, for Justin Jefferson, where I'm just converting him into, other really elite options and taking the risk out of that. So that's around with Caleb. Any more thoughts on that?
No, I think I largely agree. I think the biggest thing that's appealing about Caleb Williams to me is definitely the value portion of it. Like, he's just, even if he's bad, like, Trevor Lawrence was still a really, really expensive, and he was really bad, and he was still a very expensive second-year player. So I just feel like there's, like, no risk to rolling the dice on Caleb Williams, even at his elevated cost, and the profit from him even just being average. Like, I don't think he needs to be good in order for him to be the 103 next year. If he's just, like, a good rookie quarterback, let alone a good NFL quarterback as a rookie, he's going to be the 103. And then you can basically just trade him for whatever you want, other than maybe Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And it's probably not going to cost a lot to get into Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen if either of them has, like, a mediocre season. And that's really attractive to me. One of the things that I like to look at with quarterbacks, just to touch on this because don't talk about it a whole lot, is adjusting for quality of competition. I use this one stat, and they actually closed the website this year, so I have a lead on where I might be able to get it, but I haven't actually input it yet. It's basically what they do is adjust for the quality of competition for the offense, and you can use it for quarterbacks because in college football they largely are the offense, and it works pretty well. And as a sophomore, he was like head and shoulders above the threshold I look for, like well above it. So I'm assuming as a junior he would be as well. And then the other thing that I look at is supporting cast. And when you look at quarterbacks that are efficient in college with really good wide receivers, they don't always turn out very well. If you look at quarterbacks that are not efficient in college and have really good wide receivers, they're almost always terrible. Like just almost always.
Pickett, how you doing?
Yeah. And then if you look at quarterbacks that are efficient in college that do not have good wide receivers, they're almost always awesome. And that is probably what we're looking at with Caleb Williams. It's a little bit too soon to say what some of his ancillary players are, but his leading receiver was Taj Washington, who's like a 6-year player, 5th-year player.
Receiver he's played with at any point in college is probably Marvin Mims, who's not that good.
Yeah, who's not that good. So I just don't think that we have any risk of Caleb Williams being propped up by a supporting cast, whereas we have that with Jayden Daniels. And that's my biggest concern with Jayden Daniels is how much of Jayden Daniels' excellent passing this year was a result of playing with potentially 2 first-round wide receivers. And it could be a lot. It could be not a lot. It's hard to say. They fall into efficient quarterback with efficient wide receivers. And then you're like, I don't really know. Could go either way.
Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about these two guys here, because I think we largely agree on Caleb. I don't think that we agree on the other 2 quarterbacks in order. I have Drake May a full tier higher than Jayden Daniels. You're for the audio listeners, Drew's like putting his hand as though I said your money, your beer, your life.
I'm putting my hands up in complete disbelief of the Anthony Richardson truther not.
I like Anthony Richardson
appreciating
more than Jayden Daniels.
Why?
Because Anthony Richardson actually does the things that I care about in an NFL real life sense. Like he first of all, he's large and he's not tiny. That helps.
Jayden Daniels isn't tiny.
Jayden Daniels is like quite skinny. I know like there's the weigh-in stuff.
He's like the exact same size as Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, it doesn't look it on when you watch. And he's tall and he's very lanky and he gets hit a lot. He does not avoid hits the way that Lamar Jackson does.
I swear this is 2018 Lamar Jackson talk.
Well, the one difference, Lamar Jackson actually scored a lot of rushing touchdowns in college. Jayden Daniels, as much as he ran for 1,000,000 yards, his rate of rushing touchdowns is lower than Caleb Williams. It's similar to Drake May. It's lower than Bo Nix. Like he was not used as a goal line weapon, which is, I think, a legitimate hit to his ceiling in the NFL. He's going to run a lot. That's no problem. I'll talk about these guys each in a vacuum and why I like May more. First off, like the Anthony Richardson, Jayden Daniels thing is I think to me a bit beside the point in that I just like the top of this class way more than I like the top of last year's class. If Jayden Daniels was in last year's class, I probably would have ranked him at the 1-2 in a similar way that I felt about Richardson, which was like, I don't know how this is going to go, but he clearly has a higher ceiling than anybody else, and let's put him at the 102. This class I feel much better about. Drake May compared to, I know it's hard to think of Stroud and Young as prospects now after having seen how disparate their rookie years were, but like at the time were considered kind of clones of each other as these pocket passing quarterbacks who looked pretty traditionally good, but we had ceiling limitations on due to the lack of rushing. I would have had May ranked way ahead of those guys. And I would have had Neighbors and Harrison ranked, really in the same tier as Bijan Robinson, and not in the class of any of the rest of these guys, in terms of how I felt about them coming out. And it's certainly a tier higher level, certainly a tier higher than Jahmyr Gibbs, who I really, really liked, and much higher than Jack Smith and Jigba. So I think that the level of like floor ceiling combination of the rest of these players is much different, and why I'll have Daniels ranked much lower in this class than I did with Richardson. My major issue with Daniels is twofold. It starts off with the fact that he was crappy at football for like 4 years.
But Anthony Richardson was crappy at football his entire life.
Yeah, and he'll be playing in his Jayden Daniels 5th season in like 2 years from now. Like it's like I mean the first thing that I just like don't really care about is quarterback stats. I just don't. I don't really care about it. Like to me, it's a film position primarily. And that's just where my stance is on the position. So like I know for people to look at it's like, oh my God, Jayden Daniels had all this stuff, and Anthony Richardson didn't. To me, what are the actual components of the game that you do well? Jayden Daniels, what does he do well? Even this year, he throws a brilliant deep ball. He has a lot of touch variation on that. He doesn't just whip it. He can actually throw it deep, but he can throw it with legitimate touch. He can place it where he wants it. Has like a ridiculously
so why didn't he?
Ridiculous big throw rate this year. Sorry?
Why didn't he?
Anthony Richardson also has a great. No, his deep passing was actually really strong in college. It was all the rest of his passing was horrible in college. But I was talking about Daniels specifically.
I see.
Jayden Daniels. Here's the interesting thing though about Jayden Daniels. His deep throwing this year, which was absolutely insane. He had a 45% big time throw rate on deep ball. So basically every second time he attempted a deep ball, it was a big time throw this year, which was bananas. Interestingly though, even this year, in this ridiculous year in which he led the whole class in adjusted yards per attempt, big time throw rate, big time throw turnover worth of play rate, everything you can possibly think of. Still though, looking beyond just the deep numbers, 20th in big time throw percentage on intermediate passes, 10 to 19 yards, 35th in adjusted completion percentage on intermediate passes. You want to guess where he finished in yards per attempt on intermediate passes when he was 20th out of 47 in big time throw rate and 35th in adjusted completion percentage?
Where?
First.
Dude's a stud.
Despite the quarterback isolating metrics saying he's infrequently making big time throws, he's infrequently making accurate throws, nonetheless, the result of these plays is the most efficient of any other intermediate passer. That to me just screams my teammates did this for me in terms of how much better the result of the play is versus the quarterback isolating metrics. And then
it's interesting. It's possible that he just made the easy throw to the good player because he's good at diagnosing the play and knowing where to throw the football.
Captured an adjusted completion percentage as well.
Yeah, which is great. He did a great job.
But it's not captured adjusted completion percentage. It was like 35th.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I've no pushback here. I think that it's very, very reasonable that Jayden Daniels is just completely propped up by Malik Neighbors and to some degree Brian Thomas.
And you look at the rest of his profile, it's like, he wasn't good. And I mean, he turned a corner to 2022 in an extent. Like it was better than 2020. Like in 2021, he was like an actively horrible college quarterback. And then 2022, that changed. And he became a good college quarterback. He still was not a good NFL prospect quarterback. You look through whether it's just yards per attempt, big time throw rate, any stats you want to look at. There's nothing that suggests that he's on an NFL pedigree until his final year.
Okay, wait, hold on. What about his freshman year?
Okay, freshman year was good. Yeah.
Freshman year was fucking great. He had a 9.4 adjusted yards per attempt, 17 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 1,000 yards rushing? Oh, and only 355.
Yeah, freshman year.
Barely rushed.
Freshman year was legit. I'll totally give him the freshman year. But then we had 3 years in the wilderness. But anyway, my take on it is just I and then we get into all the pressure to sack stuff.
Wait a second. Was he N'Keal Harry's quarterback in 2019?
No, but he was Brandon Ayuk's.
Brandon Ayuk. Sorry, yeah. Brandon Ayuk's quarterback.
Yeah.
So Brandon Ayuk just carried him as a freshman. That's what it was.
Yeah. You know who else was at Arizona State back then? Is Ricky Pearsall too. They were both at Arizona State, and they both went to the SEC, different schools. Yeah.
Huh. How about that?
Anyway, so I get into all this. Basically, my issue is there's pressure to sack stuff on him. It's highest rate in the class. I have issues with him in the pocket. I have issues with him throwing over the middle of the field. I have issues throwing the intermediate levels of the field. He was really good in the deep ball in 2023. He also had 2 guys who turned 50-50 balls into 80-20 balls, and Thomas and Neighbors, and then add a lot of juice after the catch too. I'm just very dubious. So where I'm at with Daniels, I want to take him after all of the guys that I think have ridiculously high ceilings and really high floors, and then I want to just take Daniels. So I think he has a really high ceiling, and I think he has a reasonable value floor. I've made this argument for other players in the past, and I would make the same one for him too. He's going to play this year. He's going to play right away. He's going to score a bunch of fantasy points, or maybe not a bunch, but even if he sucks, he's going to score probably a high-end QB2 amount of fantasy points.
He's going to be Daniel Jones at worst.
Yeah. So I think there's a good way to play Jayden Daniels. My only issue with it is just I just don't feel like I have to do that. Like last year, I felt like it's like if I wanted access, and I mean, CJ Stroud ends up hitting the ceiling, but when we talk about ceiling, we're really not talking about ceiling. We're really more talking about like likelihood of hitting ceiling. And with Anthony Richardson, and it's still a great unknown on him since he barely played. The question was always like, okay, is he like reasonably good at football? Because if he is, then he just like is a top half of the first round startup pick. And there's no real doubt about it. And it's like, there's no one else to me that could plausibly boast that kind of chunk of the range of outcomes in last year's class that even approaches that ceiling. I don't feel that way about this year's class. Drake May does not run as well as Jayden Daniels. He still runs quite a bit. He still runs at a rate in terms of like his market share of receiving yards that would still put him in a class, living with your like Deshaun Watsons and living with your like well above a Patrick Mahomes, living well above like a Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert. Like we're talking kind of Josh Allen-y, Justin Fields-y level rushing, at least in college. Maybe that doesn't all translate. Also with him, it's a more conventional profile. He came in, started in year 2, started in year 3. Both years, he was efficient. Didn't have as high of an adjusted yards per attempt as Caleb Williams, but he was still in the 9s in adjusted yards per attempt, which was solid. Did it with very limited pass catcher help. The best receiver he's played with in 2 years was third-round pick and Josh Downs. He played with not much of anyone this year. Devontae Walker, I guess, for half the season. Also, absolutely elite big-time throw rate in deep balls, both the 2022 and 2023, second and fourth, first and second in PFF passing grade in deep throws. Was also elite intermediate big-time throw rate in 2022. That fell off a little bit in 2023. Just from like watching him, he's a guy that when he moves off his spot, he's always looked to make the big play down the field, which I appreciate. Whereas I think Daniels becomes a runner much faster than May does. And all the arm talent in the world and super young prospect, just 21 years old. So I view May as like a conventionally very strong prospect production wise. And you add in a rushing element and you add in just like physical traits that I really like. I don't, I guess, see the whole hesitancy with him. I see like not Caleb Williams-y level prospect, but like normal good prospect plus rushing. I want to get excited about that. And I feel like a lot of people aren't as excited about it.
Yeah, I think for me, he just wasn't enough. Like you like his production, which is fine. It wasn't good. It's not in the area where we're like, oh wow, look at how productive it was. It was like, yeah, he was fine. And like his 8.7 yards adjusted yard, or what is this? Yeah, adjusted yards per attempt is like, it's not really good enough, but it's very close. Like it's not far off. And I do like that he's young for sure. And his rushing was great. Like he had 700 rushing yards as a sophomore. That's fantastic. Most guys don't get 700 rushing yards. He had 450 as a junior. That's also great. So he's just like, he's like fine. He's like a good like I'm not going to be out of here shouting from the rooftops that this guy is the next Josh Rosen or Daniel Jones or like just bad quarterback. But I'm also not like, oh, can't wait to draft Drake May. I'll just take him where he's available. I'm just perfectly fine with Drake May. That's what it comes down to. But what's happening is that I feel like the Dynasty community is hating on Drake May, and it's kind of making me like him.
Well, relative I think the Dynasty community, it's very factionalized. Like him and Daniels both are very, very polarizing prospects. Like there's very much Team May and Team Daniels, and I think they're pretty evenly numbered. I mean, their ADPs are almost back to back. And it's like this in NFL draft media world too, right? I mean, there are like film people that you'll find that are like, Drake May is clearly the second best quarterback in this class, and Jayden Daniels has no business in this discussion. And then there are other people that will say the exact same thing pro Jayden Daniels. And it's like, and the weird aspect of it is it's like, it's not even really a like film versus data thing or like a fantasy versus NFL thing. It's very layered because there are people that will cite the data and be like, look at Daniels' season stats versus May season stats. Daniels' stats are so much better. And there's other people that will say like, yeah, but look at the first freaking 4 years of Jayden Daniels' career versus May, who's only had 3 years of his career. Look how much better his start of his career was.
First year.
And
like he didn't even play the first year.
Yeah. Like there's, so there's multitudes to it. And I mean, and then from the film perspective, it's odd because like, there's some people like a Derek Clausen who will actually go and chart. And Ben Solak has done some charting work. And then a lot of people, it's, they're saying, and I don't blame them for this. It's just, there's no other way to say it. Like some people are saying, I watched the film and I think X is better. And the other guy's saying, I watched the film and I think Y is better. And it's like, I believe you both, but like, it's hard to take that much from it because it's ultimately an opinion. And I mean, the funny thing is with the quarterback aspect of it. I mean, this really underlies to me how random quarterback class is. Like if anyone wants to go read Derek Clausen's QB class on Twitter, his charting work, I mean, I think it's great. Matt Harmon always says, read the articles. I mean, you really got to read the articles on this because he posts the Daniels chart. And of course, it's from his 2023 season and it's all green. Post the May chart. And it's like some green, some yellow, even a little bit of red. And you just look at the charts like, oh, this is clearly a Daniels guy. You read the articles. He's like, I like Drake May a full tier better than Jayden Daniels. And you're like, wait, that doesn't match with the charts at all. So it's like even when you like do attempt to quantify it, it ultimately comes down to like a subjective opinion at the end of the day. So it's hard. There are definitely contingents, and I think Drake May's ADP will have a really high level of volatility in your rooms. I think that there will be drafts that I'm in where he goes at the 1-2 or the 1-3, and there will be drafts that he slides to the 1-7. I think that'll especially be the case if he goes to New England, because that sucks as a landing spot for anybody. Yeah. So like if he goes to New England, you have to be a Drake May guy to want to press the button in the top 4. Otherwise, you're just accepting Drake May when he comes to you.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of like the advanced stats on Sam Darnold, but just on like the surface, that's kind of what Drake May reminds me of, like a rookie passing profile. Like it's like fine. Sam Darnold. I was never like, this is the worst passer possible. This is Anthony Richardson. Like that's never going to happen. But Sam Darnold was not like an excellent passer. He was just like fine. And that's kind of how I feel about Drake May. Except the difference, of course, is that Drake May is like he did it alone. Whereas Sam Darnold had some decent wide receivers, if I recall. I think Juju was there at the time for his junior year.
Pittman. I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah. Well, there was like USC had like that string of like 3 or 4 good wide receivers that came out.
I don't know when he came in. He might even had Marquise Lee for a little bit moment. Maybe that was too early. I don't know.
I think Lee was too early for Darnold, but yeah.
I think. I mean, I've said like this is like, I don't have necessarily the spreadsheet lined up as you. For me, it's more of a film mixed with statistical indicators that I'm looking at. I think he's on like a spectrum of quarterbacks that includes Sam Darnold, Jake Locker, Matt Stafford, Justin Herbert, and Josh Allen. And I don't really know where he's going to find himself within that spectrum in the NFL. But in terms of like mobile guys with a gunslinger mentality who like take risks but aren't particularly precise with the football, that's like the world that he's living in. I happen to like that world. Like that's the type of quarterback that if you're not perfect, that's probably the next like archetype of quarterback that I just happen to like the most. So I happen to like May, but I definitely think there is like Jake Locker, Sam Darnold downside, where if the like inaccuracy issues can't be outweighed by the splash plays, then we're having problems moving the chains.
So I just looked him up here because I was curious now. For his 8.7 adjusted yards per attempt in his final season, that puts him in the same range as guys like EJ Manuel, Sam Bradford, Lamar Jackson, Carson Wentz, Joe Flacco, Brandon Weeden, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen. So like not a great group of passers, but like Carson Wentz had some flashes. Joe Flacco was like a 15-year starter. Like there's potential here.
I heard Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson is like a decent NFL passer. He's not a great passer. And the reason we love Lamar Jackson is he rushes for 1,000 friggin' yards. Drake May ain't going to do that. Drake May is more along the lines of like Caleb Williams, where it's like, he could be Joe Burrow.
I think he is I think he's far more prolific and willing scrambling than Caleb Williams. I don't think he's definitely not in the Jayden Daniels tier of rusher, where like Jayden Daniels is like a legitimate like weapon rusher, but his scramble rate from clean pockets is over double Caleb Williams. Like he's far more likely to take off and run, and that's going to be a big part of it. Like if I think he's like a similar athletic mold to Justin Herbert, but stylistically, when Justin Herbert's has to go to the backup plan, his backup plan is check down to Austin Eckler. Drake May's backup plan is run. And that's, I don't know if that's necessarily even good for him as a quarterback, but it's good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, Drake May has a lot more mobility than pretty much everyone on this list, aside from Lamar Jackson. Like everyone in his passer range, aside from Lamar Jackson, he's got quite a bit more than most guys. Like even Sam Darnold only rushed for like 250 yards or something in a season in college. So like he's mobile Sam Darnold, I guess. Which like I honestly thought Sam Darnold was going to have like a long NFL starting career. I didn't expect him to flame out quite the way that he did.
I'm still like kind of a Sam Darnold truther. I'm not like afraid to admit that. If somehow the Giants end up getting JJ McCarthy, I think we're in line for a top 12 fantasy quarterback season from Sam Darnold this year.
I'm certainly not willing to go that far, but
I want to see it. Like I think it would be good for science to find out, right? Like we've all been having this. We've all been having this fight for years about the San Francisco offense or the McVay, like all these Mick Shanahan offenses. Is Tua actually good? Is Brock Purdy actually good? Is Jimmy Garoppolo actually good? No. Like all these questions, right? So, but the issue was like I thought when it was Brock Purdy, that was going to get us our answer. Because it was like we have this Mr. Irrelevant, like Big 12 cardboard cutout college quarterback starter, but that obviously was unsuccessful because he A was like too good, and B he was an unknown. So it's a blank canvas for us to project our own biases onto when we're trying to evaluate. But what would happen if Sam Darnold was like 6th in EPA per play? Like then we know, because we know Sam Darnold's bad. We have irrefutable proof that Sam Darnold sucks. So if Sam Darnold can go into a Kevin O'Connell offense with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, however many legs he has left, and put up 8.2 yards per attempt and a top 5 finish in EPA, like that's our answer. Now we know that it's the environment and the coach and not the quarterback. And I want to see it. I'm really excited.
I did not realize this before, but is the Darnold and Sons offense, like the small town entrepreneur mom and pop shop where it's always like Jacob and Sons, Sanderson and Sons. They're all sons. Yeah. Everyone, I never noticed until you just listed them all. Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson. It's the Darnold and Sons offense. I love it.
Darnold and Sons. Nice.
It's great.
No longer Madison.
No. They lost Madison. No. What were they thinking?
Yeah.
I've never said them all out loud like that, I don't think. I've never noticed that. That's hilarious. I love it.
Who could they add? Who could they add in the draft? Is there a son in this year's class? Wide receiver. They lost KJ Osborne. They got to replace KJ Osborne. That's a big loss.
That's true. But anyways, like back to Drake May. Like I like him. I don't love him. I'll probably just take him wherever he's available. But I shouldn't even say that because
do you think Daniels is actually better than him, or is it just you think that they're similarly whatever, but Daniels runs more?
Yeah, I think that I think they're like I think Daniels has a lower floor. Like a considerably lower floor. Like I could see Daniels being Anthony Richardson. I think that's totally plausible. I don't think Drake May is going to be Anthony Richardson or like someone else who's like Josh Rosen, like that just can't pass. I don't think that Drake May is going to be that, but he might not be very good. Like he might start for 3 years, like Sam Darnold or something like that. Like I think that's perfectly plausible. Yeah. I think
I'm a Drake May guy, but I'll be the first to say like I think Sam Darnold and Jake Locker are squarely within his range of outcomes.
Yeah. Whereas I think that Jayden Daniels could just win your leagues, and I just think that's like really attractive to me. I'm like a guy that could rush for 1,000 yards at the quarterback position. I don't really care as long as he's done it at some point and he's not super expensive. Like Anthony Richardson last year came into the NFL as a startup pick in like mid round 2. As far as I've seen, Jayden Daniels isn't going anywhere around that.
Yeah, I think Daniels
I'm still like kind of into Jayden Daniels.
I think Daniels is very protected by how good the top of this rookie class is. Where like it's almost irrational. Where like I feel somewhat similar about Jayden Daniels as I did about Anthony Richardson this time last year. And part of it's just we have some like good players that really hit that kind of moved up the board last year, but also it's just a matter of like there just becomes this thing where it's like, oh, am I going to rank my 5th favorite rookie in the top of the 2nd round overall? It's like, no, I'm not. But last year it was like, this is the 102, so we got to rank him really high. And it was, I guess the big thing that's nice to me is like last year I felt very pressured regarding Anthony Richardson because it was just like if I'm trading out of the spot, if I'm not taking him, I'm just like taking a big hit on ceiling. But if I'm taking him, then I'm just taking like a massive gamble on floor. And it was like I don't really know how to handle this situation. It was perplexing. I don't really care this year with Daniels, like because like if he falls to me at the 105 or even the 104, it's like all right, great, I'll like take some. And if I just click neighbors over him every time and I just miss out, like I'm just like fine with that. It doesn't really bother me. I'll also just say I'm biased personally. I have like just truckloads of Jayden Daniels and Devi. I have like 67% exposure, so I don't need anything. I'm actually good on Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, I think that's where the conversation gets more interesting for me is how does this tie into like for a while I was like, oh, maybe Jayden Daniels is like the dude, and then I got looking into like some of the stats that don't like quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes now, matter, but like are interesting. Like a lot of the ones that you were talking about, like big time throw rates and like, adjusting completion rates and like that kind of stuff. I've never seen it like proven to like matter necessarily, but it's certainly interesting. Like I don't want to just disregard it. And when you look at all that stuff,
it's like to search for some level of context on him because his profile is so weird, right? It's like, on one sense, you can make the argument that he's Joe Burrow, right? Joe Burrow sucked for a while, and then he played with 2 elite wide receivers, and it turns out he's also really good.
And Joe Burrow,
Jayden Daniels is also really good too.
And Joe Burrow did not have a freshman year like Jayden Daniels did.
No, he did not.
Like,
this is the thing with the Devi is like I've been like Jayden Daniels was like I think my 2nd ever Devi pick. I took him like in the 2nd round after his freshman year. In my first ever Devi league. And then I've just been like the guy at the blackjack table, just like saying "hit me" repeatedly, as like he's continually sucked more and more. And I felt like last year I think I took him like 85th overall in like a Devi startup or something, like not with players included, like just of Devi
just in the Devis
in the 80s. Because I was just like, well, like. He runs a lot. Like, what if he ever put it together? And then like last year happening was like an absolute fever dream. I was just it was incredible, which is weird because I've been such a Daniels supporter for years, and then now that this has come to fruition, I'm kind of a Daniels hater. But I'll definitely take some. Quick word on McCarthy, and then we can talk about the receivers. How do you feel about JJ McCarthy?
I like JJ McCarthy.
You like JJ McCarthy? That's interesting.
I like JJ McCarthy.
Not a lot of data inclined people like JJ McCarthy, so that's interesting.
Maybe they're not looking at the right things. Have you considered that?
Well, why do you like JJ McCarthy?
Here, just give me one moment. Why don't you say something first? Because I just want to look up my stuff on him.
Yeah, I don't really have like a take on JJ McCarthy. I essentially consider him a black box. Like. He was very efficient when he was asked to throw. He was rarely asked to throw. We don't have much of a precedent of first-round quarterbacks who had like 22 dropbacks per game. So it's really hard to say how much that matters because there's just not. Well, we do a little bit with rushing quarterbacks, but we don't really have a lot of like pocket quarterbacks who don't throw.
It's just him and Andrew Luck.
Yeah, and Andrew Luck still threw like 6 more times per game.
And Andrew Luck had the same coach.
Yeah, but I got into the Luck comparison in here, and it's somewhat true, but he still threw 24% more dropbacks per game than Andrew Luck overall. And like in his last 2 seasons, it was 29 and 31 versus 23 and 22. which is, considerably different. And they also won a million games, so it wasn't all game script. Everything that I've watched McCarthy do, or anything that you look at the stats on him, he does well. It's just that when you're throwing 22 times a game, you're probably only asked to do things that you do well, right? So it's just whereas when you're Drake May and you're dropping back literally twice as many times, you're going to be put into more disadvantageous positions where you're going to make more boneheaded plays than JJ McCarthy's going to do when, all those are just becoming Blake Corum handoffs. So I'm open to JJ McCarthy. I think where I've landed on it is I'm pretty confident that he can do the core components of the Mick Shanahan offense. He's athletic enough to do the bootlegs. His best throw profiles in terms of looking at big time throw rate or accuracy adjusted is in the intermediate areas of the field. He's been consistently really accurate, 10 to 19 yards. He can hit those dig routes and slant routes that you need to hit in those offenses. And I don't really know what else he can do beyond that. I don't take that not knowing to say that he can't. It's just I don't know. But I think he can be I think he'd definitely be a more mobile Jared Goff. I think he'd be kind of like a Brock Purdy. I think he could be a peak Ryan Tannehill. And then maybe he's more beyond that. That's certainly enough for me to draft him at the 108, which seems like where he's usually going to go. And so I don't feel like I have to think about JJ McCarthy. I'm not going to take him over any of the other top guys in the top 8. I'm definitely taking him ahead of anybody else outside the top 8. And that's kind of all I have to say about him.
Yeah, so I feel similarly I'm not taking him over Drake May, or I'm not drafting him over those guys for sure. There's enough value difference where it's not really an actual conversation. And I just think that he was he was very efficient, even though it was a small amount of pass attempts. He had a 9.8 adjusted yards per attempt, which is freaking awesome. That's here. Let me just tell you. So guys in that range have been decent. Andrew Luck was only 9.4. Jared Goff was 9.4. There's some bad quarterbacks in there too, but they have other bad things about them, like Blake Bortles and Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett was really just not a consideration, even though he was pretty productive in his relatively
60 year or two that he finally did.
Yeah, in his final year, he was pretty good, but there was a lot of things not to like about Kenny Pickett.
A million years old and throwing to Jordan Addison. And
yeah. Then we had Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. Those guys were in that range. CJ Stroud is a little bit better at 10.9. Cam Newton, a little bit better again, 11.2. All kind of in that 10 range. It's not a bad range to be in. Obviously, I don't love JJ McCarthy. I'm not who are we taking, Caleb Williams or JJ McCarthy? That's not the conversation. But when we're looking at JJ McCarthy or a Brian Thomas or a Troy Franklin or those, or maybe one of these running backs that get some decent draft capital. It's just so easily JJ McCarthy for me because he was
but it will be for the market too. I think I think the potential decision point, would you consider him at all over Odunze or Bowers?
Would I consider him? Maybe. I don't know that I would do it, but I would probably consider him. Let me put it this way. If JJ McCarthy got drafted by the Vikings and it was McCarthy and Sons, then I'm probably interested over maybe Brock Bowers or Rome Odunze.
But if he goes, I think the way that the market will work is it's Caleb and Marvin, then it's going to be Malik and Daniels, or maybe Malik, Daniels, and May if May goes 2. I think he probably needs to go 2 to be in that group. If he goes 3, he's probably a little bit further down. And then I think it'll be Bowers, Odunze, and McCarthy will be kind of a group. If he goes to the Vikings, that's how I perceive it. If he goes to the Giants, I think McCarthy is his own island who goes exclusively at the 108 in every single draft and never goes earlier or later. I was
going to say, he's at a really, really narrow range for ADP. We can use the median.
You're going to look at Dynasty Daily Lab and it's going to be 92% of drafts. He's at the 108. Yeah.
So,
but if McCarthy's Vikings, I can see someone being I'll take Vikings JJ McCarthy over Patriots Drake May. Like that's not like an insane thing that someone could do.
I think it would depend on where the Vikings took him in that case. Like if they traded up to like 6 to take him or something, then I would maybe consider McCarthy there. But if they're like, I don't remember where they're picking actually. Where are the Vikings picking?
I suspect that the Vikings are going to. I suspect that he's going either to the Vikings at 4, the Vikings at 5, or the Giants at 6.
Like you think it's like locked in? He's a top 5 pick.
Well, I think if he's there at 6, and the Giants are on the clock, I would feel that he's like 70% chance to be selected. So okay. I think he's either going to the Giants at 6 or the Vikings are going to get him at 4 or 5. I think his absolute floor is Vikings at 11, but I think he goes higher than that.
Because I was thinking that he might be in the teens, and I was like, Vikings in the teens. I don't know, but or any team really in the teens. Like I'm probably gonna be less in love with JJ McCarthy.
Absolute floor would be probably like Broncos at 12, but I think because Vikings pick at 11, Broncos pick at 12, Raiders pick at 13. I mean, if you believe any of the reporting, he's going in the top 6. Even if that's a lot of hooey, which like maybe it's hooey, maybe the Giants aren't interested in him and the Vikings get intel on that, so they don't feel the need to trade up. I don't know. I can't see the Vikings sitting there at 11. If he actually made it to them, being like, no, we're going to roll with Sam Darnold, that seems unlikely to me.
I don't know. I heard some pretty compelling Darnold arguments earlier today, so anything is possible. But yeah, like I don't know if he's definitely like a top 10 pick, then I'm probably pretty interested in JJ McCarthy, like locked in at that 108, and depending on where he gets, where he ends up, I could see me questioning, and also depending on where Odunze and Bowers end up, I could see me very easily questioning McCarthy over one of them. I don't know that I would ever get to McCarthy over Daniels, though. Like, I just feel like Daniels has a completely different... What's that?
I'm not doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I am either. I think it's Daniels, like, very clearly, no matter what happens with landing spots, Daniels is quite far ahead of McCarthy for me. But I think McCarthy's, like, a fantastic, like, what's the word I'm looking for?
He's a great store of value. He's just gonna just gonna come in and he's gonna do, like, especially if he goes on Minnesota, like, and I have a certain take about like how much quarterback is responsible for the production of some of these offenses, but like if he gets to live his life with Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkins, it's like that's an easy life, man. Like you've just gotta achieve base competence, and you're on a glide path to finishing QB 10 for the rest of your life. And like, you know, think people trading the 108 for Kirk Cousins a couple years ago was not like an unheard of thing. So how'd you like to trade the 108 for 22-year-old Kirk Cousins? Quite a bit.
Yeah. And yeah, I think he's like that great consolation prize. That's the word I was looking for. It's like a consolation prize. Yes. If you miss out on like the big guns, he's still there and he's a fine pick. And then I feel like after him, I'm just like sketched out. And I'm like, I don't really like any of these guys. And I'd rather just wait till like the late second to make a pick.
Well, I agree. But before we get back to that, let's talk about these wide receivers really quick. We'll have to go a little bit faster than we did on the quarterbacks. But I guess same question off the top. Is it Marvin Harrison tier of his own, or is it Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, or is it all three of them? How do you have these guys kind of slotted?
I don't see any particular reason to have it to be one tier for all three, or for it to be each guy in their own tier. I think it's very, very clear to me that it is Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison in the same tier, and then it's Rome Odunze a notch behind. And I don't really understand any commentary apart from that. Like I don't want to say I'm not willing to listen to it, but I just don't understand it. Like it just doesn't compute for me. It's so clear to me that these are equal prospects at one, or wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, and wide receiver 3 is just a notch lower. And I don't know. I have a hard time.
That's how I see it. That's how I see it.
Because you're smart. Yeah.
I mean,
if you're an idiot, you might not see it that way, but you're not. So great job.
If you were gonna make me argue against myself in one of those directions, the direction I would argue less unwillingly would be Marvin Harrison having some gap from Neighbors. The case for that would just be that Marvin Harrison effectively has 2 truly elite seasons. His sophomore season, he had a .297 targets per route run, 3.18 yards per route run. His junior season, .324 targets per route run, yards per route run, 3.44. You go down to Neighbors, his junior season was right on par with Harrison's, .297 targets per route run, 3.64 yards per route run. So slightly more efficient, slightly less volume. His sophomore season was nowhere close to Harrison's sophomore season, .242 targets per route run, 2.46 yards per route run. So if you want 2 years of dominance over 1 year of dominance, and you think that's worth a tier break, maybe. My counter to that would be Neighbors a full year younger than Marvin Harrison. So him taking a year to match what Harrison did at the same age is like actually fine for me. I'd also suggest from like a total upside perspective of all the ways to win, Marvin Harrison, 14 career forced missed tackles. Malik Neighbors, 51. So, in terms of the production of like who is winning in the intermediate areas, who's winning downfield, both. Like there's plenty of evidence that both of them are winning at all those levels of the field. Who is also able to create a ton of yards after the catch? It's Neighbors, and it's Neighbors by a massive amount. So I actually think he has like a slightly higher true ceiling. I'm willing to just accept as fact from the film people that I care about that like he's maybe slightly more raw or less refined than Harrison. He played in the slot a little bit more. Sure, I believe that. Also a year younger. I mean, if there were any big film concerns, he wouldn't be basically locked into being a top 6 pick in the NFL draft. So I'm not that concerned. To me, it is a tier. I think I have them ranked almost back to back in my overall rankings. I slightly prefer Harrison just because of the 2 years of elite production versus 1 year of very good and 1 year of elite production. But I agree. If it's a gap, it's not a big gap. Adunze, I mean, I'll just read what I wrote on Adunze because I thought I was trying to be fair. I said, before getting into how I view him, I want to first dispel one bad faith argument about why the analytical community does not share the same level of fervor about Adunze as the film folk. That's the notion that the analytics community is fading him because he's a senior, and people say that being a senior no longer matters. With what we've seen, a string of late declare wide receivers hit, over the long haul, it remains inarguably true that if all else is equal, declaring early is a positive signal for your profile. And I linked to your Twitter thread on why that's inarguably true. That being said, it's not everything. The most important questions that we generally ask about wide receivers is 1, how much did you produce? And 2, when did you produce? The rub with Adunze is that even among other 4-year wide receivers, also drafted in the top half of round 1, his production profile does not stick out as uniquely positive. And I have posted a chart with Devonta Smith and Devontae Parker and Corey Davis and Corey Coleman and Rome Odunze and John Ross, Kevin White, and Jahan Dotson and Justin Blackmon and Chris Olave and Mike Williams. And that's all the wide receivers in the last, I think it was 10 years, who have been drafted in the top 16, who played 4 years or more in college. The only wide receivers that have a worse peak season yards per team attempt is Mike Williams, Kevin White, John Ross. And only White and Ross have a worse peak age-adjusted yards per team pass attempt. So, like, I'm just tired of being gaslit into the notion that Adunze is like some special caliber of senior wide receiver that we've never seen before. We've seen actually lots of senior wide receivers drafted in the first round before. We've seen lots of them drafted in the top 10 before. Adunze is not demonstrably better than all of the other ones. He's actually one of the worst from a production perspective. I think it's easy for someone to then point out in hindsight, like, well, this is why Rome Odunze is better than Devontae Parker, or this is why Rome Odunze is better than John Ross, or this is why, whatever. And like those things might be true. Like I think Rome Odunze is good. He's going to be drafted in the top 10. I think he's probably going to hit. And there are probably descriptive reasons why he's better than these other failures of the past. But like all of these other players had appealing things about their profile too, right? Like all of these other, like otherwise they would have been drafted in the freaking top 16 picks of the NFL draft if they had nothing appealing about them. So I like Adunze. I have him ranked pretty aggressively in Dynasty overall. I just think if we fall into the trap of pretending like the only senior wide receivers we've ever seen in our lives are Devonta Smith and Chris Olave, when they're not, And frankly, when Devonta Smith and Chris Olave haven't really done anything, like they're good, and if you have Rome Odunze and they become that, you're not upset. But I would say if you draft Malik Neighbors and they become that, you probably are a little bit upset. So that's one note. At least Smith. Anyway, all I'm saying is I just think it's incredibly reckless if you are trading back from Neighbors or Harrison into Odunze and not getting like a first for your efforts. That's my take about it. And if you find someone in your draft who does think that, and again, it's not the consensus because the market is generally set more by analytics than by film community. But if you find someone who's willing to give you Neighbors for the 107 and a second, like just do it. I'm happy to pay the insurance on the player who's way more conventionally awesome. Like when I'm pulling comps on Neighbors and Harrison, the comps are like the one bad comp is like Sammy Watkins, and the other comps it's like Amari Cooper's like the worst, and otherwise it's like Sammy Watkins, Julio Jones, AJ Green, Odell Beckham, Jamar Chase, right? Like that's the world I want to live in. If we have the choice, I want to live in the AJ Green as my median comp world, not in the Chris Olave as my dream comp world. So that's my 2 cents on Odunze, who I like. I have him ranked 38th overall in Dynasty. I think he's probably good. I just think you're inviting a lot of danger into your life if you let yourself get talked into him being equivalent to the other two.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's where the train goes off the tracks a little bit. Pardon me. Is when we're looking at some of these players that it's not that Odunze is bad, and like let's go back to the Devonta Smith class because I think that's really where a lot of issues came up. Is people were talking about Devonta Smith and Jamar Chase together, and a bunch of people like me and other analytics people went on Twitter and said, "Whoa, let's back up. They're not the same. Like I'm just sorry that they're just not the same. We do not put them in the same tier." And I particularly went on like a rampage, a months-long rampage, being like, this is not, absolutely do not. We are trading up from Devonta Smith. We're getting Jamar Chase. You do not leave your draft without Jamar Chase. And it became this like thing where it was like, you hate Devonta Smith. And I was like, whoa. I'm actually ranking Devonta Smith equally with a lot of the bulletproof prospects. I'm just not ranking with Jamar Chase. Like Devonta Smith was not a bad prospect. He was just sure as hell not Jamar Chase. And I feel like that's where we're at now with Rome Odunze. When I'm saying he's not Malik Neighbors, he's not Marvin Harrison. It's not that he's bad. He's just not those guys. Those guys are like special. And Rome Odunze can just be a very good wide receiver. And that's fine. That's okay.
In my overall rankings, I have him like I'll have far more expansive tiers when it's just my rookie rankings versus my overall top 200. But in my overall top 200, I have Odunze 2 tiers behind Neighbors and Harrison and 2 tiers ahead of any other wide receiver in the class. I do like Rome Odunze. And I'll say like his production profile, if I was to take on the argument of why it's maybe a little bit undervalued, he's playing with 2 other NFL wide receivers in the 2 Jalen's, Polk and McMillan. He's playing in like a spread offense. I've never seen this apply at the college level, but I see no reason why it wouldn't carry over. But like Hayden Winks has done a great deal of research on the inverse relationship between yards per route run and how many wide receivers are running routes in a given play. And he's in this spread offense where there's lots and lots of receivers running routes on every given play. I think that makes it a little bit more challenging to be in a production profile. He's running all of his routes at X wide receiver almost. I mean, that adds challenges to his production profile. Anyway, all that being said, like I think that there's reasons why his production is maybe a little bit better than his profile. The fact that he's getting this draft capital says it's probably a little bit better than his production profile. And all that being said, his production profile is not bad. He still had 2.93 yards per route run as a senior. That's very good. He's a very good prospect. If he was in last year's class with this draft capital, I would probably have ranked him at wide receiver 1. I wouldn't have ranked him in his own tier. I probably would have put him in the same tier as Addison and JSN, but he would have been probably my top receiver. I think anyway, I feel good about Odunze. I just it'll come down to your league in terms of I guess I don't really see a world in which I'm trading out of Harrison and Neighbors anyways, because I think Neighbors is probably the player that I want to draft the most of relative to his cost in this whole class. And I think Harrison's like at pick 14, so I'm not going to say he's undervalued. I actually think he's probably overvalued, but I still think he's so good that I don't want to leave drafts without getting any of him in my portfolio. So I'm going to sit there and take a Dunze when that's the thing to do. I'm going to explore opportunities to trade up from him, and not because I don't like him, but because he's not a don't leave your drafts without player, right? If I have to, if my goal going into every draft, we haven't talked about Bowers yet, but I want to be really overweight on Neighbors, and I would like to be overweight on Bowers. And if that means I have to be underweight on a Dunze, so be it. But it's not like I'm going in saying I want to fade a Dunze either. I'm quite content to take him if I'm sitting at 1.7 and he's there. I'm clicking his name every time, and I'm not going to be upset about it.
Yeah, so I just looked it up in my database, and this is going back to 2003. And I just chopped up the sample a little bit to because of what I think people will say if I use the whole first round. So I took out the top 5 picks because I don't feel like they're exactly representative. I don't think Rome Odunze is a top 5 NFL draft wide receiver. And I took out the bottom. I cut it off at 16. So I'm like, he's probably like a 10 in most classes. So let's go 6 to 16. So 10 picks either way, or 10 picks total. So of the players that were seniors, so they did not declare early.
Yeah.
And then they were productive to varying degrees. These are all players that had Rome Odunze production or better throughout their college careers. So at the top of the list, we have Roy Williams, who had 1 top 12 season and 3 top 24s. Then we have Lee Evans, who had 1 top 12 season and 1 top 24. Then we have Devonta Smith, who has 2 top 24 seasons so far. Michael Clayton with 1 top 24 season. And Chris Olave with 1 top 24.
And an Oscar nomination.
And an Oscar nomination. Was it Best
Picture? You get that joke?
Yeah. That's the George Clooney movie, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And then we got some other guys like Reggie Williams, Michael Floyd, Darius Haber-Bay, Tavon Austin, Troy Williamson, Kevin White, Corey Coleman, Jahan Dotson. All these guys drafted in that 6 to 16 range.
By the way, Troy Williamson, another son who was drafted by the Vikings.
Another son drafted by the Vikings. Unbelievable. So, I don't know. These guys were all productive. As productive as Rome Odunze. They were all seniors. This is the only thing we know about them. Production and seniors, and then similar draft capital. And they're not great. They're fine. We are fine with this outcome. But it's certainly not what we get when we look at Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. Those lists are a whole nother spectrum. So if you wanted to make, I don't even know that I would have Rome Odunze as a clear wide receiver 1 in last year's class. Even if he went top 10, he'd probably be in the top tier. I don't know if he'd be
I think it would have been a discussion between him and JSN, and it would have been. I think it would have been a very interesting discussion of weighting, this clearly superior in a vacuum production profile, but it's all in 1 year, and he's a slot player, and versus this guy has better draft capital and he has the more prototypical. I think that would have been a really interesting discussion. I mean, it's easy to sit here now in hindsight and be like, yeah, I would have liked to land on a Dunze instead of the guy who had a 1.32 yards per route run as a rookie. I'm not 100% sure where I would have landed. I have them ranked basically the exact same value. Just in a vacuum in terms of the tier that they're in my overall rankings going into the draft. I have them ranked the same tier that I had JSN going into the draft. So I don't know, but I think it would have been a conversation. It's not a conversation for Neighbors and Harrison. My comp list on Neighbors and Harrison is it's ridiculous. It's Chase, Green, Cooper, Watkins, Julio, Garrett Wilson is on there. It's a low end comp. It's pretty nuts.
Garrett Wilson, the worst comp you could imagine, with 30% year 2 target share. Don't want that guy.
Yeah.
So it's just so not a real discussion to me to have any inkling of Rome Odunze in the same conversation with the other two. They're just not the same. I'm sorry. And if you want to make the argument that things have changed, I think that's kind of fair. But if you're doing it because of Chris Olave, I think you have to also point to Jahan Dotson, who went 5 picks later and was also a productive senior.
Well, can we also say Chris Olave, like one big difference between now Smith has this in common with Odunze. Granted, Smith's senior season and Odunze's senior season, different galaxies of production, worth noting. But Smith, what he has in common with Odunze, not as much Dotson, if I recall correctly, but Smith in common with Odunze is they were basically non-existent for a couple of years and then pretty productive in year 3, and then they had this really big year 4 that really boosted their draft stock. You know, and that's obviously not in Smith's case, you know, worked out really well. But that's traditionally the more dangerous profile, is when it's a senior declare and it's the senior season is really doing a lot of the work. It should be noted that was not the case for Chris Olave. His best season was his second and third season. His fourth season, frankly, made his profile worse overall. So it's not as though Chris Olave like didn't produce. Like Chris Olave's profile is better than Rome Odunze's profile. I probably think of Rome Odunze more highly than I thought of Chris Olave at the time, because I am becoming more open-minded to senior receivers. But that's so like I am trying to be more open-minded about it, and I am higher on Odunze as a result. But, you know, I wouldn't go back in time and rank Chris Olave above Drake London or Garrett Wilson. Exactly. And I would rank Neighbors and Harrison considerably higher than London and Wilson, who I loved.
Yeah, I agree. Sold.
Quick Bowers thought before we maybe talk about some of the other receivers, more of a rapid fire realm. I mean, he's really good, right?
Yeah, so Brock Bowers is like, how do I put it? Kyle Pitts was like unlike anything we've ever seen at the tight end position. Brock Bowers is more productive, but less prototypical and less unicorny from like a physical standpoint. Like Brock Bowers is a little bit on the short side. He's a little bit on the light side. He's more like Evan Ingram sized, whereas Kyle Pitts was like a giant that was also like a hyper athlete that was also hyper productive, but only like for his second and third years. Whereas Brock Bowers walked into Georgia and was like the number one weapon on the team.
Oh yeah,
right from the go. And that was
I mentioned that
rare
C
and
to
awesome.
C draft when I took Jayden Daniels in the second round. I, without knowing who Brock Bowers was, just like looked up freshman tight ends and then picked one randomly in like the 9th round.
Nice.
Brock Bowers. And then like in a month, I was like, oh, I hit the jackpot. I'm so good at this.
Just nailed your high school scouting.
Yeah.
Go you. But yeah, I think
like, look what I found.
Yeah. It's kind of the same discussion actually with Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers that we had at the time, except not as much, because I think Kyle Pitts kind of flaming out the last year or so has really put a damper on the Brock Bowers bandwagon.
Yeah, which is kind of weird. Nice. You'd think that the Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, Dalton
would have got us back on track, but no.
But it hasn't. No, it hasn't. If anything, it's like the opposite. If anything, the lesson is like that. Well, actually, Dalton Kincaid did go in the first round, so
he did.
People haven't thought this one through. But the logic is like that Bowers, like Bowers is like Pitts because people are, you know, saying he's the greatest tight end prospect of all time. So the idea is like, I guess the idea is that we just don't know anything about tight end. That's the idea. So like we just don't want to pay a premium for tight end, which is kind of true-ish. But like Sam Laporta was a really good prospect, and we were like shouting that he was a really good prospect. And I mean, I don't think he'd be as good as he was, but like, and Trey McBride was a really good prospect, and Dalton Kincaid was kind of a weird prospect, but like I really liked him.
I liked him.
Just going too high. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the difference for me with Kyle Pitts. Like in the Kyle Pitts draft year, I was out on Twitter being like, you probably shouldn't draft Kyle Pitts. Not because I didn't like Kyle Pitts. I thought Kyle Pitts was the greatest tight end we've ever seen at the time as a prospect. I was saying that in one corner of my mouth, and the other corner of my mouth was like, I probably wouldn't draft him though. And the reason for that wasn't because I thought he was going to be cheaper next year, because he won't be. That was never going to be the case. I don't believe that Brock Bowers is going to be cheaper next year. I'm not in the I'm not in the boat where we're like, oh, we'll just buy him next year when he's cheaper. Well, it's not going to happen. He doesn't
Well,
have to be uber
like
productive to be more expensive.
It's also just stupid. Like that argument on any player is like 99.9% of circumstances, and the 0.1 is like maybe if there's an ACL injury. But outside of that sounds just always stupid, because if your take is like, I'll just buy him when he's cheaper next year, I don't want him if he's cheaper next year. That means he probably sucks. So like I either want him now or I don't want him. I definitely like I don't want him. I don't want to catch a falling knife. Like if Brock Bowers is 2 rounds cheaper next year, then I'm going to be telling you all to sell your Brock Bowers, like not buy your Brock Bowers.
Yeah, but the argument at that time was that Kyle Pitts and Jamar Chase were going like interchangeably in drafts. Like people really like Kyle Pitts, and reason also like Jamar Chase, but like not the way that I like Jamar Chase. And the way that they're being treated this year is more in the way that I like the players. Like Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze are like light years more expensive than Brock Bowers. And that's how it should have been, in my opinion, back in the Kyle Pitts era. So now if Brock Bowers goes out and does what Kyle Pitts did, he's going to skyrocket in value because he's not being valued way up where Kyle Pitts was. He's being valued at like, I forget, what is he, like 60th or 70th? Do you remember? Do you know?
Kyle Pitts?
No, Bowers.
Oh, Bowers way higher than that. Bowers
is he?
Yeah,
50th?
Bowers is current way higher. Bowers' current ADP is
51.
35. Oh, I don't know what you're using. Based on Dynasty Data Labs.
I'm looking at Fantasy Calc.
Okay, he's 35th on Dynasty Data Labs.
Oh, all right. Well, he's a little higher in actual drafts than he is in Fantasy Calc values. But anyways, like that's still not that is kind of pushing it a little bit for me. That's maybe the point where I'm like, there might be some other players that I'd like.
What's interesting is, so I have him ranked actually higher, which is weird. I feel like I've always been higher on tight ends, but that's kind of shifting maybe because I've ranked my overall tight end 1 in Dynasty. And yet I'm only 1 spot ahead of him in overall rankings. I have him ranked at 34. So I didn't realize until I did this exercise how low I am compared to the consensus on Sam Laporta. But
Laporta's valued really, really high, and he's very good.
Experienced. Like I don't really have a bad word. I don't have like a bad word to say about Laporta, but I keep getting boxed into sell Laporta takes. But anyway, yeah, it is high. I don't think there's like a whole lot of juice to squeeze out of it. But in the context of rookie drafts, maybe it's a little bit more manageable. I have him ranked at the 106 right now. On certain teams and in certain leagues, I could be convinced to take him at 104. Like there's just like I don't see that big of a gap between him and the quarterbacks. And if I'm in a certain league where like I don't need another quarterback and I don't want to play the game of okay, I'm going to take this quarterback and then I have to try to trade a quarterback. Like if I just like don't want to deal with it, I'll just take Bowers at the 104. I don't care. It's fine with me. So I give you my blessing to take him as high as the 104. I will never take him over Harrison or Neighbors, but the lucky thing is no one's making that case. There's no person out there. I think it's because the speaking as on behalf of Kyle Pitts Nation, like I think we're tired and we're sad, and so we're like drafting Brock Bowers, but we're just doing it more quietly this year.
We might be tired, but we shouldn't be sad. We have Kirk Cousins now. And we have rid ourselves. The Wicked Witch of the West is dead. So like things are finally looking up.
Are you a little bit scared that Kyle Pitts might not be good and that this is our last chance to sell him?
Absolutely scared of it, but in no way is that impacting what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm scared but refusing to act on that fear. I just wanted to register the fear, but I also register that I'm not acting on the fear.
Yeah, I think that it's perfectly acceptable to like question it. Like, he had 1,000 yards as a rookie, and then things haven't been so good since then. And there's a lot of context around why that might be.
Just say that again.
But there's also like, what if he just isn't that good? Like maybe his rookie year was the fluke, not the last 2 years. And it's like, how often does that happen though? Like usually the rookie year, if they're good as a rookie, they're just good players.
Maybe neither. Maybe he was great in college. He was great as a rookie. He was good in second year, got victimized by Marcus Mariota, shredded his knee, and was never the same. Like that's also possible.
That's possible. But he's getting a little bit higher now, but like where he's been being drafted for the last year. is like easy buy.
Before they signed Kirk Cousins, the thought of selling Kyle Pitts never even entered my mind because it's just like whatever, I'm holding forever. But now he has finally like before it used to be like A, I think he's really talented, and B, like I'm just buying because everyone thinks the situation sucks and eventually it's going to not suck. But now that it doesn't suck anymore, now that he went from the worst situation on earth to like a top 5 situation in the NFL
overnight.
So anyway, I'm getting a little bit sketched, but still in on Pitts overall, and I'm very in on Bowers. The one thing I would point out, kind of how you talked about with Pitts, the line that I had in my column was, if we expected Kyle Pitts to transcend the tight end position, the idea with Bowers is that he would perfect the tight end position. Like
you're a poet.
Thank you. The thing with Bowers that I like maybe more than Pitts, like maybe I'm not trying to do revisionist history. It's maybe just something that I kind of ignored with Pitts that I shouldn't have, which is the whole, like, he's not even a tight end thing. Can be good, can also be bad. It can be bad if you can't block well enough to play tight end, and then all of the ridiculous athleticism that you have as a tight end is actually just like decently good athleticism as an X receiver. And that's kind of a little bit of the thing he's gotten stuck into, where it's like, we're not going to play him actually as a receiver. We're going to play him as a tight end, but he can't block, so he's not going to have enough routes. And then he gets subbed off at the goal line because they don't play him on run plays. And so if they put him on a play action play at the goal line, the defense knows it's not a run play. So if they want to run a play action pass from the 1 yard line, they have to pretend it's a run play, which means he can't be on the field. And it's just, it becomes an issue where hopefully under a new coach, they're willing to cater more to their personnel and build things around their players. I have faith in that. But when you have Arthur Smith as your coach, then you can get kind of square peg, round hole, or whatever the thing is, round peg.
Yeah, no, you got it.
Hole.
Square peg, round hole. Nailed it.
There we go. With Bowers, you know, the size is a concern, but by all accounts, and I don't grind his blocking tape, so I'm just taking the word of the people who grind blocking tape.
Oh God. You don't grind the blocking tape? That's wild.
But the people, you know the website Grinding the Mocks, the people who are grinding the blocks. Grindingtheblocks.com tells me that he's a good run blocker. So that's good to hear. And you know, if you just even kind of just watching him, like I think is definitely not the athlete that Pitts is in terms of like you know, my lasting memory of the good times of Kyle Pitts is him running that like double move deep route in the preseason against the Jets and catching that like 55-yard bomb, the one perfectly placed throw Marcus Mariota had in his Falcons career.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's not really Bowers' game, but what is his game is running actual tight end routes. Like he can run the whip and he can run the dig and he can run the slant. And he's like shifty. He's a little bit more twitchy and more agile, I think, than Kyle Pitts, who's like a little bit more of a gazelle.
That is exactly what I think of when I watch Kyle Pitts. Not that I would ever watch Kyle Pitts or football in general, but if I did, I would think gazelle. Definitely.
Right. So I feel good about that. Also, the other thing with Kyle Pitts, with Brock Bowers, is you're getting yak ability. I mean, first of all, absolutely ridiculous that he like frequently got carries at Georgia of all places. They were just like, we're handing this like white Hunter Renfrow looking individual the ball. He turned 19 carries into 5 rushing touchdowns. Also, finished top 3 among all tight ends in the nation in yards after catch per reception all 3 years of his college career. And you know, some tight ends are like glorified H-backs in college with like a 2 ADOT. He was doing it on not a receiver ADOT, but on like a real tight end ADOT. He had 8.8, 9.0, and then 6.5. All 3 of those years was still top 3 in yards after catch. So to me, it's the total package in terms of an actual tight end and what he's able to do. And I'm very excited. Very in on Bowers, very on Neighbors. We're already at an hour 40, so maybe we'll have to try and find some other time to come back to the rest of this class. I'm not going to make promises to that on air, but we'll try. Really quick before we go, how would you rate the class 1 to 8? How would you rank them, the top 8 guys?
Probably Caleb at 1, and then Marvin and Neighbors 2 and 3, and then probably Daniels and May and Bowers, I guess. And then Rome and JJ. Pretty sure that's how it would work out.
Man, 100 minutes of podcasting, and it's pretty boring. I mean, I have the exact same top 8, and the only difference order is I like May more than Daniels, but like but otherwise I have the exact same order: Caleb, Marvin, Neighbors, May, Daniels, Bowers, Rome, JJ McCarthy.
Wow, you couldn't have just lied, come up with something outlandish. Like, aren't we supposed to? Like, that's how you get, what is it, Twitter clout or whatever? By
That's
lying?
how you get clout. Yeah, I didn't clout chase. Just in case we don't get back on the air, give one player out that we didn't talk about today, outside the top 8, that you don't want to leave your drafts without.
That I don't want to leave my draft. I don't have any players outside of any top 8 in any class have ever existed that I don't want to leave my draft though, except for Jalen Hurts and his
Sam Howell.
Year. And who?
You don't want to leave your drafts without Sam Howell.
I don't know if we said that, did we? Sam Howell?
I'm pretty sure you said that exact phrase. I'm gonna look up in the Discord after this. Leave your drafts without, and then Sam Howell. I mean, and not a bad take. Like, Sam Howell sucks, but like, he was like a 3rd round rookie pick, and he was worth a 1st round,
or maybe a 4th.
Yeah, and for a moment there, he was worth a 1st round rookie pick. You had to have a quick trigger finger on that, but he was worth it for a second there.
Yeah, I don't recall that one, but I'll take credit for it because I did like him. I just don't remember being like, we need to not leave our drafts without him. It's very rare that I'm that into like especially a day 3 player. So I will believe you, but
I remember that. And it is possible that you said that before he fell to day 3.
That could be because there was talk of him being a 1st round pick. Like before, like we've talked about this so many times, but like he was supposed to be the 101 in that class for 2 years.
Well, like, actually, the guy who was supposed to be the 101 in that class was Spencer Rattler, who's in this class.
That's true, Spencer Rattler. Yeah, what could have been Spencer Rattler.
That's my player. Don't leave your drafts without Spencer Rattler. My toxic trait is that I kind of do like Spencer Rattler.
Like, if we're talking about 4th round picks, I'm probably picking Spencer Rattler. I'm gonna pay very close attention to my use of do not leave your draft without him anymore. I'm not gonna say that about Spencer Rattler. If I did say that about Sam Howell, but I will be taking Spencer Rattler in round 4 if he gets like drafted.
He's gonna get drafted. I think he might even go on day 2. I think he has a chance at going in round 3.
Yeah, if he gets drafted at day 2, though, I don't think he's going to be a 4th round rookie pick. He'd probably be in the 3rd round.
He'd be the 3rd round. But, okay, is there anyone you like marginally more than consensus after the top 8? How about that?
Not really anyone that I like am super excited about. There's guys that I'm
hater. Is there anyone you hate? Is there anyone you hate?
Oh, lots of players I hate. I hate this whole class almost.
You hate?
Player that I hate. Does Michael Penix count?
Yeah, you can talk about Michael Penix.
Yeah. So he's like.
You have to say Penix though. You can't say Penix. It's too close.
I like Penix. Michael Penix, MPJ.
No, we already have an MPJ.
The quarterback QB MPJ. Not my dude. I don't know if you remember this. I was still like pretty. Not that I don't intend to come back to Twitter at some point, but I was still very active on Twitter. Or pretty active at Twitter last year during the college football championship week.
Yeah, when Michael Penix was just like,
and people were talking about Michael Penix being amazing, and I was like, just gonna say, people were talking also about Rome Odunze being amazing, and I was like, wait a second, like, it seems to me that it might be Rome Odunze who's pretty good, and not Michael Penix. If you think that Rome Odunze is pretty good. Michael Penix is, if he's like okay in your eyes or like good in your eyes, but Rome Odunze is great in your eyes, it's probably not the quarterback that you like. So just go ahead and knock him down. And now as it has turned out, Michael Penix has taken a significant tumble in the eyes of the scouting community since that college football championship game.
Well, but now the word is that he's back up. I mean, we're having reports that he might go 13th overall.
What?
That was the recent report out of Vegas, is that they're strongly considering him at 13th.
Oh my.
And I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think he'll go round 2. I struggle. Like, I don't like to be the guy who has like a firm negative take on a quarterback, especially. I have like no interest in Michael Penix. I have him like unreasonably buried in my rankings, and that's mostly just because he doesn't run at all.
And he couldn't pass either.
I've watched him play quarterback for like 6 years, so I don't feel like there's like anything left unsaid in the Michael Penix profile. He's not accurate. He doesn't like the one thing that I've seen people bring up in his defense is that his pressure to sack ratio is very low, but his EPA when pressured is actually terrible. It's just that he doesn't take sacks because he doesn't want to get hit, so he just throws the ball away all the time. But which is, I mean, better than taking a sack. But like Drake May, for instance, actually has a pretty high EPA when pressured because sometimes he'll take sacks, but he also will then like sometimes complete passes. Whereas Penix is just every time that the pressure comes near him is just chucking it to the stands. I don't like his throwing motion. I think it's long and like he's just the most like
just because he's left-handed,
Taylor Heineke like career backup type of guy possible. I don't get the appeal. I don't really like Bo Nix either, but I like Bo Nix a lot more than Michael Penix if forced to pick a senior citizen second round quarterback.
Yeah, and he's going. He's the 13th rookie on Fantasy Calc right now, and that is,
Penix?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, so I have Penix among rookies. I mean, we'll see how this actually shakes out, but among rookies, I have Penix currently ranked 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I have him ranked 20th.
That sounds about right. Like he should be like a second, third round.
Yeah, I have him. He's one of the last names in my base 2 tier. I have him right between Blake Corum and Keon Coleman and Ricky Pearsall. I have right above him, and I have Xavier Legette, Jalen Wright, and Marshawn Lloyd right below him. That's the crew I have him out with.
So I'm going to go ahead and not draft Michael Penix until probably the very, very late second round or early third round.
Could you imagine? I mean, here's the bet that I have. If people want to tail me on this, I have plus 145. So you put $10 on it, you win $14.50, total $24.50. Under 4.5 quarterbacks in round 1. I'm surprised this was plus money. Bo Nix and Michael Penix did not scream round 1 quarterback to me.
I agree. Completely agree.
And we do this every year, don't we? Like every year around this time, it's like last year people are saying Hendon Hooker gonna get round 1 draft capital.
Totally forgot about Hendon Hooker round 1 draft capital. It's hilarious.
People were saying
even Will Levis. People were saying Will Levis is gonna be a top 5 pick.
Will Levis was minus 1,000 to be 4th overall when the Colts were on the clock. Colts were on the clock. Like, and I'd been saying the whole day, I was like, I think the Colts are going to take Richardson. Like, all the local people are saying it's going to be Richardson. And then when they went on, and I had like bet on Richardson to go there. And then when they got on the clock and it was minus 1,000 Will Levis, I finally white flagged. I was like, well, I guess I'm wrong, and I have to like root for Will Levis. This sucks. And then they were like Anthony Richardson. I was like, oh wow, okay, nobody knows anything. Like we're all just. And then no one took him for the entire rest of the round. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's funny that you say, and then you thought you were gonna have to root for Will Levis, and then what ended up happening was he actually had one magical opening game, and then you did root for Will Levis thereafter.
I don't use past tense. I'm in on Will Levis.
Wow, that is one of the worst takes of the year.
I'm a lot more in on Will Levis than Michael Penix.
Anthony Richardson?
No, I don't know how to feel about Anthony Richardson in fantasy, man. I mean, I'm still paralyzed about it. I don't like. Yeah, I don't know. He's just a guy that I would prefer my fantasy portfolio not to be decided by. Like your at market exposure is 8.3%. I would like to have 8.3% Anthony Richardson. I don't want any part of my fantasy season decided by the stance that I took on Anthony Richardson. That might change. Like we've done this dance with Fields before in the past. Like there might be something that happens with Richardson in which I think like way out or way in is the way to go. But right now, I don't know, man. Like he's so inaccurate, and that's the problem because you want to be accurate as a quarterback, but he runs a ton. They play at such a high pace. They have good weapons. He plays indoors. I love the play caller. Like everything is so favorably set up for him that I think he's gonna have to really try hard to fail. And it's tough in fantasy to not want to be in on someone with that level of rushing and that level of offensive infrastructure. So I'm interested, and I think he does some things well. Like there were, I still think he throws a very good deep ball. He avoids sacks really well. It's just like he doesn't need to be, a precise passer in the intermediate of the field, but like can he get to like Cam Newton level? Can he get to like, or is he just Vince Young or Colin Kaepernick, where it's just not going to happen? I don't know.
He's probably those because he's never been accurate at any point in his life.
Yeah, I mean he's not accurate. That's for sure. You watch him throw a 5-yard pass, it's going nowhere near where it's supposed to go.
Accuracy is actually a pretty important part of completing passes, which is a pretty important part of playing quarterback. So I would hesitate to be in at 8.3% rostership of a 15th overall quarterback.
But you feel comfortable being at 0 when Richardson has 2 good games and he's the 103 in Superflex.
He has 2 bad games and he's Justin Fields. He's a backup quarterback somewhere else.
Yeah, that's why I'm not comfortable having a position. I want to just.
Why at that price range? Are you telling me that Breece Hall doesn't go out and dominate for 4 games to open the season? He's going to be a top 5 startup pick.
No, he won't. He doesn't play quarterback.
Okay, he won't be top 5. He'll be
Justin Jefferson.
He'll certainly be top 10.
Yeah, he could be top 10.
Yeah. Or who else could you change up for? You change up for Caleb Williams.
I would say. I'll say this for Richardson, right? Like if we were drafting right now, who's the most likely player to be the 2025 101 in startups? Richardson's probably like your 4th pick, right?
The most likely?
If the draft was purely, if we were doing a draft in which we were trying to draft the 2025 101 in Dynasty startups, overall 101, nothing else mattered. That was all we were trying to draft. Like to me, I would draft Josh Allen first. I would draft Patrick Mahomes second. Okay. I'd probably draft Caleb Williams third, and then I think I would draft Anthony Richardson.
I don't think that I would.
Who else has a better chance? Like Lamar Jackson is not going to be the 101. Like he's not.
Yeah, but not as Anthony Richardson.
Not going to be the 101. But Anthony Richardson pretty easily could be the 101. Yeah. He runs.
Yeah, if he learns how to play quarterback, he could very easily be the 101. Sure. If Justin Jefferson learns how to play quarterback, he's the 101.
Okay, well, I think one of those players learning how to play quarterback is more likely than the other. Lamar Jackson was like truly an abysmal thrower in his first year in the NFL. And after his second year, he was the 101 in startups.
His first year was terrible, but he also was not terrible in college. He was fine in college.
Yeah. Josh Allen was terrible in college. Was terrible in his first year.
If your argument
also terrible in his second year, and then after his third year, he was the 101 in startups.
Okay, well, if we're gonna say that Josh Allen is a plausible track for anyone,
2 of the 3 most recent players to be 101 in startups, which is Lamar, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, were awful passers year 1. So it's not that crazy.
It's pretty crazy because Lamar Jackson wasn't terrible in college. Josh Allen was. I will agree with you on that. But through history, Josh Allen is the guy. He's the example. He's the only one. And we got better options than that.
I don't know. I wouldn't rule it out. That's all I'm saying. But I also wouldn't rule it in. I wouldn't want to be shoveling boatloads of Anthony Richardson.
I would rather have Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow and
I'd rather.
I'd even take Kyler Murray over Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I would rather have Joe Burrow and Herbert too, for sure. I have them a full tier ahead.
No, I don't mean in Dynasty. I mean in your scenario of who's the most likely.
No, that's not happening. Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert are 0.000% to be the 101.
Why not?
Because they don't run the ball, and they're old. Well, not old, but they're not young as Richardson. That's not going to happen.
Well, I'd rather have Jayden Daniels then.
Jayden Daniels is the logical pick.
I'd rather Drake May.
Jayden Daniels and Drake May are live in this.
Hell, I might even take Will Levis. Do you see what he did in his first game?
Okay. We jumped the shark.
Okay, that was too far.
I agree with you. Jayden Daniels would be probably number 5 on this list for me.
Yeah, I don't think that it's like a foregone conclusion. Like you're like, oh, those guys are too old. Do you know how old Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are? They're 28 years old.
Yeah, they score a lot more fantasy points than Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow do.
But not if Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow score 25 fantasy points this year.
Okay, well, first of all, we can abstain from Justin Herbert in this conversation because they're going to run the ball 830 times.
Who says so?
Oh, do you want something that's going to blow your mind?
If we're playing in imaginary land where Anthony Richardson can be the 101, Justin Herbert can easily be the 101 as well.
The listeners are going to be. I'm going to post this poll on Twitter, and we'll see what I know the masses are going to have my back on this one. Do you want to get your mind blown? By the way, do you want to guess what number of quarterback Justin Herbert is being drafted right now in best ball leagues, seasonal best ball leagues?
10.
14. Not a top 12 quarterback.
Okay. Like I've been a Justin Herbert hater.
Do you want to guess?
Else love Justin Herbert.
I also have been a Justin Herbert fantasy hater my whole life. And this is like crazy to me. I've never seen people like so certain of any coaching narrative in my life and how certain people are on how this offense is going to work. Okay. I'm going to name the quarterbacks in order that go ahead of Justin Herbert. Some of these, he's actually down another spot. He's down to 15. He's fallen to 15.
Oh my God.
Check. If we do another podcast in 2 weeks, he'll be at 23. Okay, Josh Allen, of course, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson goes 6 rounds ahead of Justin Herbert. Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, which is very funny to me because last year Dak Prescott was the quarterback in the offense that wasn't going to pass the ball anymore, but now they will. It turns out actually that the teams with the good quarterbacks do tend to pass the ball, even if we just have their coaches bad. Jordan Love, Kyler Murray. 2 full rounds ahead of Justin Herbert is Brock Purdy. That's an interesting one. Caleb Williams, Tua Tagovailoa, and here's one that really feels like a kick in the dick. Jared Goff is being drafted.
Ooh. Ouch! That is the most painful one of all, easily.
Yeah.
Oh,
I want to know that one especially. I want to know who's doing this. Who is scrolling to their list and saying and looking at Jared Goff and Justin Herbert and clicking the. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. It's not how I would spend my money.
Don't the Chargers have the 5th overall pick or something?
Yeah, they're probably going to draft Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it looks bad right now, but it's not going to look bad. What's going to look bad is the offensive coordinator and the head coach being anti-pass. But right now, it's they have that terrible. Oh, I forget his name already. Palmer, right?
Palmer. And they got your boy Quentin Johnson.
And they got Quentin Johnson, and that looks awful. The wide receivers look awful. Who's the tight end now?
Hayden Hurst.
It's Hayden Hurst. I forgot about Hayden Hurst. Yeah. So
the key is that
the skill positions are looking great.
They got Gus, they got J.K. Dobbins, and they got Hayden Hurst.
Oh yeah, they got J.K. Dobbins just the other day, right? Was that today?
It's today they got Dobbins.
Yeah. So the skill positions look rough, but as soon as they take Malik Neighbors, the skill positions aren't that bad. Nobody else really matters.
Yeah, Palmer is an NFL player.
Palmer's an NFL player. Quentin Johnson's
and then they're going to get someone and
nothing, but could be something in a miracle. But likely nothing. But Which NFL team has like a really good wide receiver 3? None of them.
Quentin Johnston's on the path of coming this July is the quote on moving Quentin Johnston into a big slot role. That's the path we're on with Quentin Johnston is when we get the two round ADP rise after he's moved into the big slot role.
That's exactly right. So yeah, like once they get a real wide receiver 1, like it's fine. Then it's just a matter of will they let him pass, and they're not going to make him. They're not going to let him pass 30 times a game. Like they're not going to put him in that range, but they might be mid-tier.
I really hope. I mean, I think their defense sucks. I don't even think it's really up to them how much they pass. Also, but I think that I really hope that the pessimism about this Charger situation affects whoever they draft. I'm praying that my dream outcome is that they draft Malik Neighbors, and that people are still like, I don't know if that's a good landing spot. I mean, could you imagine if we got to have Malik Neighbors with Justin Herbert for life and people don't think it's a good landing spot? Like, that would be a true treat.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but last year I was pretty interested in Quentin Johnston because he was going to have Justin Herbert for life.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
And I am absolutely going to be very interested in Malik Neighbors with Justin Herbert for life.
If Malik Neighbors does go to the Chargers at 5,
it might even be Marvin.
It might be Marvin, but this take is the more interesting one. If Malik Neighbors goes to the Chargers at 5, I would contemplate making him my 101.
Yeah, I think I probably wouldn't. Still,
he would be my 102. I think I would just straight up rank him over Marvin at that point.
Yeah.
I think they're about the same. And if you're telling me one plays his entire career with Justin Herbert, like that's pretty darn great, right? Like, I mean, if we were just drafting quarterbacks to play, like if we were just doing landing spot draft and it was like not even landing spot, but which quarterback do you want your fantasy receiver to be tied to right now? And you get them for the rest of their career. Like Herbert's, it's like a clear top 3, right? Or top 4, I guess. It's Mahomes, Herbert, and Stroud and Burrow, and like, hell yeah.
What about Josh
Allen? He'd probably be 5th.
Yeah, he's in the tier though.
He's the best fantasy quarterback, but I think I would rather have a fantasy receiver tied to the drop back guys.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like
he's plenty good at. Obviously he was plenty good at supporting Stephon Diggs for years. It's not.
Yeah,
I
feel like he's pretty high volume passer too. Like he is a big time rusher, but I feel like he also he's like leading the league in both rush attempts and pass attempts for quarterbacks, and that's pretty interesting. Maybe he's not actually, but he's in the conversation.
All right, and he's in there too. All right, it's a top 5.
Yeah, it's a top 5. So
all right.
Yeah, I'm very whoever the Chargers draft, I'm going to, I never really considered making them 101 because I'm probably just never going to have Caleb Williams not as 101 because of the value potential.
Yeah, but that's not podcasting.
That would not get Twitter clout. So I'm going to take that, or X clout. So I'm going to take that back.
The danger zone for me is like, what's going to happen, and when we do this maybe after the draft, is like the Chargers are going to trade back, or the Bills are going to take like an Adney Mitchell or something, and then that player is going to be like really sought after, and that's going to be an agonizing choice because they're going to take some bum who I don't like, but I'm not going to be like there's no chance. And I don't want to miss out on Justin Herbert's number 1 wide receiver for life, but I also don't really want to pay the 109 to take Adney Mitchell. Like it's just that's what I don't want to live in that world. I want to just take Malik Neighbors. That's what I want.
You know what I think would be a lot of fun is if the Buffalo Bills would do what the Atlanta Falcons did back in like 2011 or whatever year Julio Jones was in, and they trade up to like 8 or 9 or something and take Rome Odunze. And then Rome Odunze jumps everyone else to a wide receiver 1, and then we get Marv and Malik at discounts. That's my dream world.
Yes,
that's what
I did this. I did this exact dream world in the mock draft that I put out this week. I had Marvin Harrison going at 4. I had the Vikings trading up with the Chargers to 5, so I had them taking JJ McCarthy there. The Chargers ended up taking Brian Thomas in this world at 23. Then I had Malik Neighbors going to the Giants at 6, and I had the Bills trading all the way up to 8 with the Falcons, giving their 25-1 and or no, it was giving I think it was 2 2s and a 3 or something like that. Anyway, and getting a Dunze, and yes, then we're getting a Dunze Neighbors, same tier. People taking a Dunze first. That would be fun. I like that.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to be there. Like I'm not
going to be there. I'm not going to be there, but I want that to be the case.
Yeah, I want that. I want that for my ability to acquire more Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr.
And this is the thing. Like I actually will not have FOMO if I'm fading a Dunze for Neighbors at equal value, even on the Bills, because I believe in Neighbors that much. But I will have FOMO if I'm like trying to contemplate what the hell to do with like Adonai Mitchell on the Bills, because I'm like, it's like I don't really want to take him at 109, but it's not like there's anybody else I care about at 109 either. So it's like I'll just like do it, I guess. Because that's where it's like annoying. It's like, okay, if one of these like sketchy guys gets the really good landing spot, then it's like I don't think that they're worth what they're going to be worth, but there's no one else that I really want to take either. So it's like, all right, I guess I'll just do this.
I think that's like I know some people still do just like linear rankings. Not many people anymore, I think, but a lot of the big sites do still. And it's like so important to know that there is a substantial break after the top players. It's not, just take the next guy. It's like move heaven and earth to get into those top players, and then just don't draft anyone for about 10 picks.
Well, the weirdest one is like, what if we get, at least with the wide receivers, there'll be draft capital. What if we get like a 3rd round, like Trey Benson on the Cowboys or something? Yeah, it's like that's gonna be like what the fuck do you do with that? Yeah. Right? Because that's where it's like, okay, maybe we get 300 touches on the Dallas Cowboys, or maybe it's Trey Sermon. And it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what it's going to be.
So, I don't know. It'll be tricky because I feel like I would probably be pretty interested in that, actually. And now I'm immediately debating.
2nd round.
Would I rather have the 3rd round, first running back off the board, 3rd round player go to like the Cowboys, or would I rather have the 1st round wide receiver I don't even like? And I don't know which way I would lean.
I don't know either. I mean, this is the thing. Because if it's the 2nd round, like if they just decide like it's Brooks or Benson and it's round 2, I'm like, okay, works for me. 109, easy. Like, lock it in. But if it's the 3rd round, it's like I don't really want to spend the 109 on like the 85th overall pick running back. Like that's not a great feeling. That's traditionally bad decision making, but also I really do want the Cowboys running back, so it's like I don't know.
There's some bad like 2nd round picks though that got pushed up because of no other good running backs in their classes. Like 2014 had that what was his name? Bishop Sankey, and there was that one Hill. Guy, Jeremy Hill too, but he played for the Rams and he was terrible. Right Trey before Todd Gurley. Was it Trey Mason?
Trey Mason.
Yeah, that sounds Zach maybe Stacey? Right. No, Zach Stacey did something in the NFL, I think. I'm pretty sure it was Trey Mason. He got some hype.
Trey Mason was a 3rd round pick.
Didn't do anything.
He was there for like a year.
Yeah. So like there has been some. Oh, maybe he was a 3rd round, not a 2nd round.
Trey Mason was a 3rd. Yeah. But there's been a lot of failed 2nd round running back picks. Like Kerryon Johnson was a 2nd round pick.
For sure. I just mean ones that got pushed way up. Because of lack of other alternatives. Yeah. But it might have been Trey Mason I was thinking of, who was a 3rd rounder. Anyways, the moral of the story is,
I mean, heck, we've had 3rd rounders pushed up, right? Keyshawn Vaughn was a 1st round rookie pick. Trey Sermon was a 1st round rookie pick.
I forgot about Keyshawn Vaughn. Oh my god, that's so funny.
Michael Carter was going at the 1-2 turn, and he was taken in the 4th round.
That's true. Michael Carter. Oh my god! Like these running backs, I tell you. Who was that other one? Devin A. Chain. I think he was drafted pretty high, wasn't
he? Yeah, and that one worked. That one worked.
Did it? For a few games, anyway.
Well, I mean, it's even if you don't think it's gonna work, if you want to be a hater, you can sell for twice what you got them for.
Yeah. So there's like the odd random.
I mean, I'm an H-hand believer, but like, irrespective of what you think about Devin H-hand moving forward, it's indisputably, if you took him in your rankings, you're quite happy because I'm pretty sure he's like a 3rd round startup pick right now.
You're probably right. Anyways, I got to go to bed. It's super late and it's tax season.
All right. That's a wrap. Okay. I will end this recording. I'm not sure when we'll be back for the listeners, but I would suspect, well, I can 90% promise that we will either be back shortly before the draft or after the draft to talk about the rest of this class. We'll find a way.
If we're not back before the class, we will definitely be back right after the class because tax season will be done and I will have more free time to.
And we got a lot of guys left to talk about here. It took us 2 hours to talk about 8 guys and Trey Mason.
And Trey Mason. Who did we talk about first? Who was our first guy? Tavon Austin. We went into in detail of Tavon Austin.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night.